Council member, how are you, sir?
All is well. All is well. Thanks for having me.
And because it's such a broad term, I'm joined by Council member Joe Borelli, who has not, he's made it clear that he's not a fan of congestion pricing.
No.
But Council member, here's what I would say. You were paid a high compliment by Jimmy Otto, a man who I respect and revere as one of the classiest people I've ever met in this line of work. But one of the things he said in the response to someone saying or tweeting, who knows, was that you do your homework, you know the facts, and you're not going to be caught off guard in terms of the data and the statistics. But my question to you is, I get that you're not a fan of congestion pricing. Put yourself in the shoes of the leadership of the city and state. What
Yeah.
would you do? What would you do if you had the power? How would you fix the MTA's problems? Because that's what this is
Right.
supposedly about, right? Is the MTA
Let
has
let me
it's this 100-year-old system, runs 24 hours a day, needs major upgrades. The population has exploded. Communities that didn't exist are now right booming and thriving. What would you do? How would you
well,
fix
I
the
mean,
MTA?
it depends in this hypothetical situation. How long can my time machine go back? Because my great grandfather dug the subway tunnels, and they, paid him probably 5 cents a day for like the IRT lines. If I can go back in time, I'd work those guys even harder so we can get subway networks built, all over the city, including Staten Island, and we wouldn't be left with these transit deserts all around the city. That's a 100-year timeline. If I had a 5-year timeline, a 6-year timeline, I'd go back to the Cuomo administration and stop bail reform and stop raise the age and stop closing our mental institutions and basically not set the stage that allowed for the pandemic to basically erode any semblance of public safety in the subway system. Because, look, I am 5'9" ish, right? I'm probably 5'8". I am, 230 pounds, probably 240 because I'm fat, right? But I'm not as afraid as a lot of people are of taking the subway. But I hear day in and day out that people are afraid. But even when I go in the subway, my head is on the swivel like I'm Lawrence Taylor in 1986 looking out for problems. So I think you'd have to go back there to create the sense that the subway is still safe. That said, going forward, obviously, it goes without saying, you can't have a system where a bunch of people, if not half, or when it comes to buses, most, right? When it comes to subways, some, you can't have a system where a part of the population doesn't pay to enter the system, and the other part of the population does pay to enter the system. That's unfair. And the fact that people get away with fare beating just encourages more fare beating. So that's whatever that ends up being, 500 million, 600 million, 700 million, whatever that ends up being, that is. The other way to get more money is to take any one of the 7 taxes that the state legislature has declared and legislated to be lockbox revenue sources for the MTA and tweak them and raise revenues the old-fashioned way, where the legislature has to have the courage to actually say, we are going to vote on a hike in this tax or that tax. Right? That's what you elect your legislators to do. You elect them to make hard decisions and suffer the political consequences. If that's what has to happen, that's what has to happen. But a lot of this has to do with the MTA's, glaring incapability of delivering capital projects on time and under budget. If it was just that we spend 2 times the amount of London and Paris on underground subway miles, I'd say fine. If it was 3 times the amount, okay, maybe. But we spend 8 times the amount of money on building underground subway lines as other major world cities. That's an unsustainable proposition going forward for the MTA. How can we even issue debt to potentially build more underground subway networks when there's no reasonable expectation that they'll ever be built within within a manageable rather dollar amount?
Do you think, council member, that there will be? I know that the firefighters and the police unions are not happy with the. Do you think there's a possibility that this thing gets tweaked, amended, and/or potentially reversed to some extent?
No, I don't, because I think once there's a crack in the dam, I think it collapses. And I think the governor, who's played this poorly the whole way, I think she's made the right determination, tactically that the minute you give some exemptions, it's going to all fall apart. I think this gets resolved perhaps by the incoming presidential administration or by a rejection of the governor and a rejection of sort of these policies that brought us into play in the first place. I'm willing to bet that if the vote was held on congestion pricing as a standalone vote again today, it would not pass the legislature.
Council member, what do you make of your party now at the city and the state level? Inauguration is soon. Why did President Trump gain so much ground in New York City and New York State as
He
opposed to
gained,
the last
yeah,
cycle?
I think it's a great question because there are still so many people in New York City and state who don't like President Trump, and that's fine. The problem is they're also starting to realize that the Democratic Party doesn't like them. The Democratic Party doesn't stand for middle class anymore. The Democratic Party doesn't stand for people who abide by the law. The Democratic Party doesn't stand for middle class people who pay taxes anymore. The Democratic Party doesn't stand for working poor, working middle class homeowners. Doesn't stand for people that have to use with congestion pricing their car to get to their job. Right. So the Democratic Party has pushed all of these groups away. And, they've stuck to this framing of every issue, in terms of racial and ethnic boxes. And I think we're moving beyond that phase of our political history and seeing things more about class. And when you look at class structure, I actually think the Republican Party is doing a much better job offering a path to prosperity, a path to middle class success than the Democratic Party. That's why you're seeing the party, my party, improve with African Americans, improve with Hispanics, improve with Asians, improve with South Asians, improve with Russian speakers, improve with Jewish voters. You can go down the list on and on.
Council member, any interest on your part in running for mayor?
No, I would have run if Eric Adams resigned. I think it's an uphill fight for a Republican, and it would have been fun, frankly, to do it for 2 months and put my name out there in a nonpartisan special election and see where the chips fall. It's an uphill run to do it in a general election, so I will not be running in a general election.
Councilmember, what do you think of former Governor Cuomo's chances and prospects? His name's been floated. Yesterday, the mayor put out, took some light shots. Could you call him that at former Governor Cuomo on bail reform? What do you think? Do you think he runs? What's your prediction?
I think he runs for something in the next 2 years. I think he wants to be governor more than he wants to be mayor. I think he is smart enough. I mean, Governor Cuomo has the best finger in all of politics because he can lick that finger and stick it up in the air, and he can tell which way the wind's blowing better than any other human in the American political panoply. And I think he realizes correctly that a lot of his past positions are untenable now. So he's distancing himself from that. And that's why Mayor Adams is correct to bring up the fact that it was him who passed bail reform. It was him who passed raise the age. It was him who passed congestion pricing. It was him who closed the mental institutions down. It was him who did so many of the things, we're now paying for. I mean, it was him who bloated the state budget by, I forget the percentage, over the decade he was in office. I mean, all of these things are attributable to Andrew Cuomo and no one else. But again, he has such a great political acumen and wherewithal that I think he realizes he has one shot at this. Because if he's rejected by the voters once, he has no chance of ever running for election again. Is he going to run against Eric Adams? I don't think so. Look, I think their core voters, their base, is the same. And that's a tough calculus for Andrew Cuomo to risk. And given the governor's vulnerability, I'm not sure why, and the fact that Tish James is saying essentially she's not running for governor, I'm not sure why Andrew Cuomo, there isn't more talk about Andrew Cuomo running for governor than there is mayor.
Councilmember, what do you make of Mayor Adams' prospects with the climate right now and people wanting more moderate, less left? What do you think of his prospects for re-election?
I think it puts him in a better, I think if he's not in jail, he has a great position to win re-election. I think eventually labor comes home to him. I think eventually some Democratic white ethnics start going back to him. as the best alternative if they care about public safety. I think Jewish voters haven't abandoned him, and I think African American voters haven't abandoned him. And I think that makes up a great coalition to go forward in the race. So if the cloud of his legal troubles goes away, I think you'll see the donor class, you'll see the labor class, you'll see some even the advocates. I think you'll see them start gravitating back towards the mayor, because incumbents always have a nasty way of winning. Remember how unpopular Bill de Blasio was, and yet somehow he won. I mean, this is just the nature of politics. The big vulnerability for him is obviously the legal issues. I think he'd be well served by actually taking some accounting of some of the people he hired that are facing legal troubles, and just acknowledging that, maybe some of them weren't the best choice. Maybe some of them weren't great public servants, and then sort of taking a little bit of ownership as he goes forward.
Councilmember, anyone running against him that impresses you in any way? Again, just from an objective perspective that you've seen how they've run their campaign, how they've managed their campaign, maybe some policy ideas that you do agree with for some of the stuff they've announced, or do you think
No,
they're
no,
all
no,
too
no
far
policy
left?
ideas.
So left, they left us.
Yeah, definitely no policy ideas. But look, I mean, I disagree with a lot of people who I do respect, and I mean, I have to give credit to Brad Lander for putting out a pretty impressive list of endorsements across the sort of 5 boroughs, people ranging from Public Advocate Williams to Borough President Reynoso. I mean, I think that goes a long way in validating his hope that he wants to be sort of the anti-Adams candidate. I mean, that's certainly, the angle he's running for. He's obviously running against him from the left. Will it end up working out for him? I'm not sure. Does the Jessica Ramos and the Zohran Mamdani and Zellner Myrie, do their candidacies generate enough ranked choice votes that would go to Brad Lander to compete with Eric Adams? I'm not sure, because if you look at who got the most ranked choice votes, and the only time we've ever had a ranked choice mayoral race, it was the 2 most moderate candidates who were in the final 2. Maya Wiley finished a pretty distant third.
Councilmember, what do you make of the folks that are thinking about running for comptroller or have announced to run for comptroller? One of your colleagues, Finance Chair Justin Brannan, someone you serve with, I believe, Councilmember Mark Levine, and Assemblymember Jennifer Raj Kumar.
I like them all. I'm doing an op-ed with Justin Brannan. I think it'll be in the New York Post next week at some point. It'll be our 7th in our series about property tax reforms and where we're at with it and what still needs to happen. It's something he and I worked on. I've known Mark Levine for the better part of a decade. I have tremendous respect for him. I don't want to say too many nice things about him because I don't want to hurt his chances of winning. I don't want to be that guy. But I think he'd make an excellent comptroller. I think he's got a good understanding of how government works, and I think he has the right temperament to be a comptroller. And of course, the Assemblywoman Raj Kumar is a friend, and she's someone I have a great deal of respect for, and she's certainly been, campaigning for this job quite a bit, and probably has a great deal of depth in a lot of the communities that we're seeing surges of new voters coming from. And I think she has the most money on hand, if I'm not mistaken. So I think this is more of an interesting race to watch than anything else as it plays out. And I wouldn't bet on this race at all. I would, if I was putting money on the poly market, I wouldn't be betting on the comptroller's race.
Councilmember, let's move over to the state. Richie Torres, Mike Lawler, Lieutenant Governor Delgado, understanding the power of the bully pulpit and incumbency, do you think they have a legitimate shot if they were to decide they wanted to run against Governor Hochul? And what do you make of the 3?
Unpopular opinion. I actually think that Governor Hochul is in a worse political, vice grip than Eric Adams. I've been asking people over the past week or two whether they think Governor Hochul is going to be governor on January 1st, 2027, and the answer has been a resounding no. From an outsider, I'm not an insider in her world, but from an outsider, it seems like she's just mailing it in herself. And the conflicting messages coming from her campaign is just frankly, it's bizarre. It's we're putting more money in your pockets, we're charging you a congestion toll, we're giving you a tax break here. Like it's basically the equivalent of flailing your arms as you're drowning, trying to make something stick, anything that'll make her popular. They're just so desperate to get any attention, any news out there to change the downward spiral of her popularity. I'm not sure what does change it. I'm not sure what does help her in this circumstance. And Richie Torres has been gaining a lot of ground. He is someone that has, in addition to many other Democrats, he has sort of flipped from being a leftist progressive, a member of the council's progressive caucus, to moderate. Hey, maybe we shouldn't let people go after they've been arrested a number of times. Yeah, that's called bail reform. That's what Republicans have been bitching and moaning about for the last 5 years. Maybe we should civilly confine people. Yeah, I mean, again, these are all moderate, if not Republican positions. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I love Mike Lawler. He is a personal friend. I think he'd make an absolutely tremendous governor. I think the state would be well served by him as governor. The race is tough for him because Trump won. And it will be a midterm year in the Trump reelection cycle. And it's going to be tough to see how the congressional districts play out for Republicans in a way that gives the Republican gubernatorial candidate the opportunity to get enough votes statewide. I think it's very possible that Mike Lawler is the next governor of New York State. And, I'll certainly be supporting him and doing whatever I can to get him elected.
Councilmember, what will it take for us to have a Republican mayor in the city of New York? We had 20 years from Giuliani to Bloomberg, and it wasn't that long ago.
And it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't 20 years
correctly.
ago. Question is, what will it take?
If you remember correctly, I think the point is that these weren't bad times in New York City's history. These were actually, some of the pinnacle of what governance good governance has brought to New York City. What will it take?
And a lot of the Bloomberg folks are currently in part of the current administration. It's also,
sure. I think if we could change nonpartisan elections and give New York nonpartisan elections like every other city in the country except for us in Philadelphia, that would create an environment where moderate candidates, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, have an easier chance of winning. That should be everyone's goal. We should have mayors that care about, the old Fiorello LaGuardia model of it doesn't take a Republican or Democrat to pick up the trash, right? That's what people seem to want in other cities around the country. And I imagine a majority of voters will want that in New York City if they're given the opportunity through nonpartisan elections. A Republican has an uphill fight against Eric Adams this year. I think it's going to be tough. Curtis Lewa didn't do well in the last mayoral race. Can he do better this time? I'm not sure, but I can tell you this: we're going to see some entertaining moments on the campaign trail.
Councilmember, I'm going to play devil's advocate with you now for conceivable, right? There's been Mayor Adams once upon a time was registered as a Republican. He is a Democrat. He said it time and time again, I am running as a Democrat. Let's just say, fantasy world, if he were, for whatever reason, to become a member of the Republican Party and run, would you embrace him?
Well, I mean,
I would read an article, I'm just based on what I'm reading and hearing. I read an article that the party, your party, would not support him or embrace him as one of their own if he were to do such a thing.
Yeah, I probably leaked the story. I probably leaked that story. It's not a question of embracing. It's a question of, best path for him to win. And to have him join the Republican Party, take himself out of a Democratic Party, get a Wilson Pakula to run as a Republican, because it's too late for him to just enroll in the party and be in the party. He'd have to cut some deal with county chairs to essentially get a Wilson Pakula, and then he'd lose. He'd lose to Curtis Lewa or just to use an example, Nicole Malliotakis or some other Republican. He would lose that Republican primary, no question. So what gain is it for him to get in the race as a Republican? I just don't see a viable path for him to do that going forward.
We're going to wrap this up, council member, but let's have a little fun now. Let's play hypotheticals. This is factual. What's your thoughts on biggest winner and loser for 2024 now that we're in the new year?
Ooh, good question. Biggest winner is Donald Trump. There's no question about that. This is someone who was completely written off in 2020. was in the depths of political isolation. And despite the best efforts of the Democratic Party, he won, and he won pretty handily. And I don't think it's possible to see any other big winner other than that.
Any winners at the state or city level that you want to highlight?
Winners at the state level. That's
Or
a good
city?
question.
Could
Yeah, I know. I have to think about that. I would have to think about that. You caught me off guard with that one. I can tell you who the loser is, though. I think Kathy Hochul is the loser. And I don't mean that personally. I don't mean any disrespect to her in saying that. In fact, I actually the one time I ever had lunch with her when she was lieutenant governor, I find her quite pleasant and kind to deal with. However, I don't think someone's political stock has gotten lower quicker than Kathy Hochul in 2024. That's my
predictions
take.
predictions for 2025. Give me three
Mayor Adams.
predictions.
If I had to just okay, so now I'm going to bet. So I'll take the safe bet. Public advocate Jumaane Williams. He's going to win.
Okay.
I don't even know if anyone's running against him. I think Mark Levine wins for comptroller. And again, that's not my preference. I just think he wins. And I think Mayor Adams wins. I think incumbents are just you can never discount an incumbent.
Council member, let's one last question and we'll wrap it up. Talk about the body you serve in the New York City Council. What are you looking to do in 2025? What are your personal sort of agenda items? And how do you think that the body is functioning? There's been some
Well,
back and forth between the executive and the council. Some will say, hey, it's a co-branch, and that's part of, the back and forth, serve and volley. What are your thoughts?
Well, my goal for the 2025 City Council is to get the fuck out of it. As a matter of fact, I'm term limited at the end of the year, and where I'm weighing my options. So the only thing I can tell you on the personal side of what I'll be doing in 2025 is vacating my City Council seat and moving on to something hopefully bigger and better. I think the air in the City Council has been sucked up by this, opposing the mayor for the sake of opposing the mayor. I don't think it's been productive, to say the least. I don't think the back and forth has really served either side well. I think the mayor has to learn how to cajole the legislature a little better. And I think the speaker has to learn how to, use the oversight tool as a stick and carrot rather than just the press podium to score shots. I can't look at the accomplishments of the city council and see a long list of things that the council has accomplished by opposing the mayor on so many things. We passed that how many stops bill, which is just bullshit. It's not going to do anything, right? It's not going to solve anything. It's going to make more paperwork. The city for all, no one's talking about the city for all, but we're all talking about the city for yes. So in that respect, she actually gave the mayor, the biggest legislative win he had, and no one remembers that there was this other component of it called the city for all. That's my hot take on the council, if you'd ask me.
Councilmember, thank you for your time. Thank you for doing this. Hopefully this won't be the last time. Anything you want to add to the conversation? Anything I forgot to ask you that you want to mention?
What do I want to mention? I just hope everyone has a blessed and happy 2025. I mean, New Year's are about taking a little bit of self-reflection, and that includes me. So hopefully you and I and everyone listening will have a blessed 2025.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. I appreciate you stepping up and getting on. And again, let's continue to talk and continue success to you and your family, okay?
Thank you, and you too.